You got a friend in me. Do, do, do. You got a friend in me. What's going on, dungeon dwellers? Welcome back to Dave's Dungeon. I am, as always, the one, the only Dungeon Master Dave, and I'm bringing you another episode of Spooktober 2023. You'll forgive me if I'm a little bit quieter this time. It's early or late in the morning, and I'm trying not to wake anybody up. So, today we are bringing you Brain Damage, 1988 film. One, Frank Henenlotter's writing and directing. Now, if you don't know anything about Frank Henenlotter, this is where we get into it a little bit. He's a very particular writer slash director who you might know a little bit better from his, I don't know, I want to say his most popular work, Basket Case. So if you know anything about a little friend in a basket named Belial, you know the director and the writer. And that's sort of the thing with a Frank Henenlotter film. He tends to direct his films. And so this is part of what I would call his, for lack of a better term, extended universe. You know, because what world isn't complete with a bunch of weird monsters? And I got to talk to you guys today about something in particular. Everybody's using the term kaiju wrong, and we'll talk about it in the gory details, but it kind of bugs me sometimes. But at the same time, I think we can talk about it, and we can discuss why I think the monsters in this film fit the description. But without any further ado, let's get into the body count. We have one static into a tiki head into a medical journal intro scroll, complete with wacky intro music. Frank Henenlotter loves his basically harpsichord intros. One buying a dozen brains from the butcher because someone's hungry. Puny little things, quote. One Aylmer's dinner time goes horribly wrong, and I mean horribly wrong. By the way, you don't know who Aylmer is, you just know he's hungry for brains. One couple, Martha and Morris, begin to lose their shit about 2 minutes in. Hey, it's about 2 minutes in right now. And I don't mean they just, I mean completely start dismantling the place where they've lived. One, introducing another character, Brian, who can't come to the phone right now. He's sleeping something off. Bum, bum, bum. One, we return back to Martha and Morris only to find they are still losing their shit 6 minutes in. And I promise you, it's the whole top of the 10 minutes of this film is Martha and Morris completely losing their crap, taking everything apart, breaking everything. At the top of this film, you're wondering, is there some sort of secret wrestling match, or has someone mentioned a secret word that they weren't supposed to? You know, like Aylmer, you know. Paul Ruman, rest well, buddy. We'll miss you. We're gonna miss you a lot. Pee Wee Herman, rest in peace. But I mean, we're just losing it at this point. We're just just lose it. One brother looking at my girl with that kind of crazed look in his eye and his jaw clenched up like he want to do something. Like, I don't know how you're Brian and you go, bro, what are you doing? Why are you looking at her like that? It's a little, I mean, it's a little kind of unsubtle. One, after 8 minutes, Martha and Morris start going door to door asking people, can I look in your tub? 1-7, I was like at 8 minutes and like 30 seconds. Martha and Morris finally go into DTs and foam at the mouth and lay on the floor and just convulse. So you're now wondering, what did they take? What's happening? What's going on? One main character, Brian, finds himself hitting a second sort of puberty because he makes a mess in the bed. That's definitely not going to wash out, Brian. One, oh fuck, I'm bleeding. Let me stare at it until I almost pass out and fall down scene, because of course he's squeamish around blood. At the beginning, anyway. One, whoa, I'm tripping balls, man. You're right, you are tripping balls, Brian. Whoa! Scene. One sweet, sweet blue slushy spilt all over my bedroom floor. And now why am I drowning in it? Scene. One iconic high introduction of Aylmer, the parasite that now lives inside you that decided to raise some kind of special meth that helps, you feel good. Quote. One, I'm now infested by a parasite from beyond because the couple down the stairs decided to bring in moths imported from Suriname. Because, of course, you always get into it because someone else brought it in the building. One, me and my brain parasite have decided to start a committed relationship together. I'm sorry, Barbara, but bye. I mean, the guy basically abandons his girlfriend and his brother at this point. So it's kind of like sort of a later on when it's like, what's going on with Brian? It kind of starts earlier than that. Y'all started asking questions a little late, don't you think? One, this brain hooks me up with the good shit, or this bug hooks me up with the good shit. 6-inch needle going into the back of Brian's skull. Not to mention more blue slushy. One, trust me, Brian, trust me. Never listen to the parasite, ever. I mean, in this or anything else. You look at Alien, it's a bad idea. You look at brain damage, it's a bad idea. You look at Deadly Spawn, which we'll cover later, it's a bad idea. Don't trust the parasites. One, and Brian jizzed in his pants, then went for a walk. One, tripping the light fantastique down at the graveyard. It'd help if I could speak. One tripping of the light fantastic down at the graveyard. One, maybe I should have partied a little quieter so that the security guard couldn't hear me. Oh no, that was part of the plan? Oh, okay. One, freeze, asshole. What is this? It's Aylmer. Surprise. One, Aylmer has a hunger that only cop brain can satisfy. Because raw face is kind of gross. One, wow. He's not bad, just a bit underdone. Quote. Aylmer finally gets a snack. One, hey, can you juice me again? The colors are starting to fade. One 3-hour bath with your new best parasite. One, I'm sorry, I can't see you anymore. It's not you, it's me and my new need to trip balls hourly. One absolutely disgusting bowl of brain soup in a bed of spaghetti covered in a nice tomato sauce with some Parmesan and basil on the side, just mwah. One, we have to break up because I'm seeing a parasite conversation. One, I have to go because I'm not hungry anymore. I'm jonesing. I need to. One, Brian getting high next to a homeless man. It's kind of awkward because he goes back to moaning and making his weird faces again. One, Club Hell with a bright glowing sign. You know, because the colors weren't bright enough as it was, Brian. You gotta go down to where they show out the neon stuff, huh? One, you're fucked up, aren't you? Wanna dance? Someone smelt fresh meat, because of course she did. One, giggling so hard while you lean up against the speaker that you end up on the title cover of the movie box. Cover art scene. One, it feels like you got a real monster in there. Surprise. Aylmer Eiffel Tower. If you don't know, now you know. One, taking him out back for a little sucky, but waking up with blood in your pants. Foo. Yeah, Brian ends up around where these dumpsters are a few times, wondering, how did this get here? One, Brian runs into a Morris Ackerman, decidedly looking a little perturbed. You know, he looks a little rough and crackled. You know, he had to change his underwear. One, history of Aylmer, not Elmer. That's Aylmer. Aylmer. One, definitive spelling with definition. The awe-inspiring famous one. So the secret to Aylmer is that he makes you famous somehow. And as we hear from Morris, it's like a bunch of famous people had him right before they died. So it becomes a question, were they really a famous person anymore after they met Aylmer? Did Aylmer cause their fame? It's more questions to be answered in the spoilers. I mean, the gory details. One, he's mine, damn you. He's mine. Ackerman gets completely shoved into the garbage cans and thrown off of Brian, and the sort of silliest action scene you can guess at. I mean, if some people have had problems with some of the action scenes that have happened so far, this one is pitiable. I mean, get out of here, old man. How many times am I gonna have to teach you this lesson? One, me and my brain parasite gotta lay low for a little while, brother. So I gotta go. One, Sunshine Hotel, a quiet hole to lay low in, at least for a little while. You know, like in that other movie by Frank Henenlotter. Yeah, it's inevitable that we end up in a hotel in one of his movies, it seems like. One, Brian and Aylmer have their first human parasite relationship fight, you know, because those always go well for the human. One, part of my talent is to spare you the unpleasantness, quote Brian, but because you've screwed with me, not anymore. One, finding out he's only with you for the brains, because of course he is. One, it's not going to happen anymore. What? Killing people. Oh, I thought you meant getting high. Quote. One, if you want it, you're going to beg for it now. And let's see who cracks first. Contest between the parasite and the human. And I gotta say, it don't end well for good old Brian. One, these withdrawals are killer, man. Brian is tripping hard. One, we're not in Kansas anymore, and Brian has lost his ear. Or maybe sort of delusion. One song from your favorite Parasite, the Aylmer tune, which I gotta say is kind of catchy. All of them sing my tune. One, Brian and Aylmer get a bath in the public shower. One, Aylmer was very, very hungry and ended up making a mess. One, Brian walks in on Mike and Barbara together, joining. One, super awkward boner holes. And three-way scene where Brian's sort of sleeping and having a weird dream about maybe having other baby Aylmers. One, I don't want it to be either of you. Brian confession monologue where he tries to tell him what's going on with him, but of course no one listens to him because he's not been himself lately. One, hey, it's Kevin Van Heckenrick from Basket Case, and that's Basket Case. That's the case with Belial in it. What a coincidence. One, ill-advised train ride Barbara shouldn't have taken. Yeah, because of course she's got to follow him to the train and then get on it. Two, Frank Henenlotter Kaiju, Belial and Aylmer. Almost showdown, but decide better of it. One last kiss, and now he knows what she's thinking and what she tastes like. The Ackermans are finally back, and this time they brought a Luger pistol, because the allusion to Germans and the sort of pistol should have given it away, what's going on here. One, Aylmer finally gets up the strength to attack Miss Martha and eats her brains. In, glorious, gory detail. One, Mr. Morris tries to fight Aylmer off, but gets mushed himself. Because, man, at this point, Brian has done the wrong thing. But before Mr. Morris goes out, Aylmer hooked back up to Brian, and Mr. Morris, while he wasn't paying attention, shoink, fresh squeezed drugs right into Brian's brain. Get juiced, Aylmer. Aylmer's death. One, Brian, who's taken too much and now can see even further beyond. Scream sequence. And one final tripping of the light fantastic, way too hard. One final time. Dave says this movie is 4 skulls. MVP awards go to John Zachary as the voice of Aylmer. They don't want to credit him, but that's who was actually the voice of Aylmer, according to several places I was able to find the note. Also, MVP awards go to Rick Hurst. Also, the movie lists him as Herbst, as Brian. Kevin Van Heckenrick Hentenrick as the man with the basket carrying around Belial. Special award for writer-director Frank Henenlotter for creating what is arguably the weirdest multiverse of anybody's imagining. And I just gotta say, a special thank you to Theo Barnes and Lucille St. Peter as Morris and Martha Ackerman. They may not be the most notable bad guys, but and in this film, who's really the bad guy is often, what's going on here. But they're good for what they do. I think they bring the problem into a sort of domestic sense that if it was some Renfield-esque kind of character or some, I don't know, I think we'll talk about that a little bit deeper in the gory details. But for now, I think that's going to do it for the spoiler section of this review. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you go see this. If you've already seen this one and you want another recommendation, make sure you've seen Basket Case. And then if you've seen Basket Case is a trilogy. There's a 1, there's a 2, and there's a 3. And I've sat through all 3 of those, and I gotta say, it is something any and all horror fans should do once. It's sort of like a Friday the 13th marathon. Once you've gotten through the best of the best, you kind of need to do it all. You kind of need to do all the ones that may not be so good and all the ones that, might get a little goofy. But I'm telling you, if you've already seen Brain Damage and you've already seen Basket Case, make sure you've checked out that whole series, because there's a child and a wedding. Yes, I said a beautiful wedding. And yes, but what a shame, but the poor groom's bride is a whore. Yeah, it actually does follow that a little bit. But thank you so much for joining me, dungeon dwellers who need to skedaddle. But that's going to do it for our journeys together. But make like a freaking skitter off into the darkness. Gory details. So, this movie, it's easy to say everyone's the asshole. Brian, he gets off into something, and he, instead of clinging to those who actually care about him and love him, decides, me and the parasite are okay. Me and the drugs are okay. I'm just going to take the drugs and that's going to be fine. So he's not the hero of this story. And in the same way, Mr. and Mrs. Ackerman, Morris and Martha, they're not the bad guys. They're victims of Aylmer's, just the same as Brian is, if you think Brian is a victim of being, sort of psychologically forced through this addiction to do these awful things, and to, basically give his permission and his blessing over each one as he goes further along. Those two people aren't the villains just because they resist Brian, and Brian isn't the hero just because he does, I don't know, Brian is not the hero. Brian is someone who gives us the sensation of even a good person breaks at some point. And with what they go through the detox, where you're given the first hint of how bad it is, and then when you see it full force in Brian, you don't know how many bad days you are from becoming the very thing that would have scared you before, and before you become the bad guy. So I think Henenlotter here has done a fantastic job of capturing that in a world full of people who are looking after their own interests. Who is good, and in a story where we're all struggling with, our addictions and what feels good and what feels right versus our hungers and our desires and what we need. You get the sense that there's no clear line here, and you could have just as easily shared Brian's fate, where you woke up and there was a worm in your bucket, so to speak. And it's just one of those things of like, it as a strange eldritch thing, that's one thing, but as a sort of story that can ultimately translate to other human experiences, it does resonate on the levels of what you need to understand it. It just has a blue worm in it who hooks you up with the good shit. I love the little Elmer puppet, and people are crazy about it. I mean, you can find them everywhere. Speaking of which, finding this movie to watch, you can basically find it anywhere. Shudder had it. I found it on YouTube at one point. I think Hulu had it at one point. So again, you may have to search out it a little bit, but it should be available out there somewhere. And like I said, Four Skulls, it is of its time. So some of the things look a little dated in the way they come across, but for the most part, it's a top-notch film that still stands up to even modern effects. Like I said, some of the shots you can tell it's a little dated, and you can tell, but not to mention it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. This is one of those high weird stories. So I hope you like it, and I hope you enjoy this inspires you to take a look at Frank Henenlotter's work and the greater sort of multiverse that he created, because you can't get into sort of the wackiness of horror without looking at some of these sorts of tales. But anything else I want to talk about? Was that it? No, oh yeah, the thing about kaiju. I went looking, and kaiju in Japanese, from what I understand, means strange creature. Does not necessarily mean enlarged creature. So it could be a strange monster. So I don't know who started this thing where all kaiju gotta be big, but I don't think that's technically what the word actually means. I think it actually means creature, strange monster. So I think you can safely call Belial and Aylmer kaiju, in the same way that I wouldn't classify them the same type of kaiju as Godzilla and the others in the kaiju, like King Kong and Mothra and Rodan. You know, these are the sort of micro kaiju, if you want to do that. But for me, kaiju isn't a thing of size. It's a thing of strange creature. It's a definition for monster, a sort of terminology for monster, in the sense that it means strangeness is circulating around this creature that isn't normal to what we experience. So I don't know. That's just a fun little bit of linguistic trivia. If you know me, I'm big on that stuff and what constitutes what. But anyway, that's gonna do it for this gory details section. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope the sort of weird topics I get into in this part doesn't aggravate you too bad, and I hope, maybe you find something interesting out of it. I don't know, who cares? But that's gonna do it for this. I hope you've enjoyed it, Dungeon Dwellers, and I gotta say, I really appreciate you guys so much for watching these videos, and especially those that watch them all the way to the end, because you guys are the real OG Dungeon Dwellers. You guys are blowing my videos up and making me feel like $1 million. So thank you guys so much for your interest and your continued support. I hope you will catch a... I hope you will join us again, Dungeon Dwellers. But until then, until our journeys bring us back together, make sure the bed bugs don't bite. I think this is what happens when you let the bed bugs bite.